Welcome, listeners, to a brand new bonus episode of Oh My Word podcast. And today we've got a really special treat. We have an author with us, Shanti Hershenson, who you're going to find out all about her. So just hang in there because this is going to be really great. Shanti, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you so much for having me.
Glad and pleased to have you, especially because you're a little bit of unique kind of author. We've had many authors on before, and each one's got their own thing. But you've got something very particularly unique going through, which, before we get into the whole origin story, why don't you please tell us, how old were you when your first book came out?
I was 12 years old.
I just let that sing for a moment. So there we go. With that said, you don't have to go too far back maybe for your origin story, but how did any of this come about? You know what I'm going to do? I'm going to write a book, then you actually wrote a book and got it out there. How did this all happen?
Well, I was interested in writing for just about as long as I can remember. I have memories from early elementary school of trying to write a book and failing, or just scratching these little doodles on paper and binding them into a book. So once the pandemic hit, I had the time, and time is, of course, really important to writing a book. And I was very isolated. I was very lonely. I didn't really have much to do. So I was like, you know what? I really want to write a book. I can pinpoint the exact moment to a walk on the beach with my family when I was telling my sister, I kind of want to write a book. I don't know what it is about the beach necessarily, but it's always very kind of just inspiring to write. You can always come up with book ideas on the beach for some reason. So I got home and I didn't start writing then. I think it was maybe a few days later when I actually sat down and started writing the book.
And just like that. Okay, going back for it, you said you had a lot of time. Were you in a regular school and they weren't doing any of the online schooling stuff, or was it just because you were able to do most of the work on your own, so it wasn't really occupying your day?
I believe at that point it was that school had just ended. There was nothing to do. It was because it was in July of 2020 when I started.
Okay.
I can't pinpoint the exact moment. It might have been when school was just ending. It's very hard to figure out, but it was sometime around that point.
And then you say you were randomly walking on the beach and you had this idea of oh yeah, this is what I'll write about. Or was it, okay, I want to write a book, now I have to go find my idea?
It was, I want to write a book, and then as we kept walking, I kind of started thinking of an idea, and that was the one I'd come up with. So by the end of the walk, I did have a sort of an idea. It was very blurry.
And just as a one or two liner, what's your first book about?
So my first book, which is actually not actually my first published book, that book takes place 30 years after an alien invasion in which the humans are forced to live captive in these separate biomes. It's very interesting. I don't really know how exactly I thought of it, other than I was thinking about Minecraft maybe, and then one idea kind of sprung to another, and that's how I got to it. Biomlock is honestly very strange. It's definitely the best book I've ever written, but it is a book, so...
I think everybody's got to have one. Maybe even two, but everyone's got to have at least one. And how old your protagonist in that? Did you go up or were you same age?
13, so a little older.
And then do you remember how many words was your first novel?
Unfortunately, I do. So, Biomlock is currently a trilogy, but it wasn't written that way. It was written as one novel. So the first draft, actually it was the second draft of Biomlock, was 250,000 words and 800 pages.
Holy
that was split into a trilogy very quickly.
Okay, this is your first novel that was published, not the first one you wrote, right? Correct? You just said that?
It was the first novel I wrote, yeah.
Oh, the first one you wrote and the first one that you published.
Yeah, technically it's the first novel I published. I have one book before that I wrote actually kind of during the editing process of that. Novel told in poetry, so it doesn't really count. First published novel, and it was my first written novel.
You wrote 250,000 words. Yeah. Holy canasta. That is a lot.
Yeah.
Well, how long did it take you to do that?
6 months.
Okay, I feel a little bit better about that now. I don't think I've ever reached 250,000 words. Was it 250,000 words because you were just writing and you weren't really paying attention to anything else, it was just getting the story out? Or did you think you have to keep putting words out?
I was trying to get a story written. So one thing that really helped was I kept going back, and there were chapters in the villain's perspective that I added. So originally, it maybe would have been around 100,000 words. I rewrote a lot of the book and added a bunch of scenes, so there's that. Originally, I think if I wouldn't have rewritten it, and if I wouldn't have added any scenes, it would have taken maybe a little less amount of time to write, and it would have been probably only 100,000 words.
That's still a lot. So you took that 250 and you split it into multiple books. Is that what you're saying happened?
Sort of. I had to cut a couple of just scenes in some of the longer sentences, around 230,000, so the cutting really didn't do much. Then it was split into 3 books. I actually wrote the 4th book the summer after. That book is not 250,000 words.
So how many words did the first book get published with?
60,000.
Oh, okay. Yeah, because that would have been a really big book. Okay, so what's it? So that means if you're still writing it 6 months later, school started up again at that point, or things were still kind of in shutdown mode, so you still had a lot of time for writing?
School started up at that point. I spent the majority of 7th grade working on Biomlock. I think it was around March, perhaps, that the editing was really just going on. There wasn't much more for me to do. I then started writing a series of novellas. And then not until the summer of 2021, actually, did I start writing more novels that were thankfully not 250,000 words.
Yeah, oh my goodness. How many novels have you got out now, which is about 2 years later? How many novels have you got out?
Published or written?
Written is always more, but published.
Yeah. So for published, 11 books.
Including the novellas that you were speaking of.
So there are a couple of novellas, but the novellas are like near novel length, sort of. It's kind of iffy on what they are.
Wow,
So,
hey, good for you, yeah.
6 novels.
6 novels, and then the 5 other about-ish are novellas. Sounds like you got more in the works, even.
Oh yeah, I have way more novels. Because the remainder of the books I've yet to publish are novels, and I'm currently writing my 18th book, so...
Wow, so you feel like the ideas are just coming, like they're not even stopping, or are you still working within the same world that you originally created?
The ideas are, honestly, they just don't stop. I'm working on, like, several different universes, sort of.
Are they all science fiction, or are you mixing up the genres?
They're usually all science fiction, however, I've been trying to kind of explore in different genres.
Or is it just because that's the idea you got, or have you always been partial to science fiction?
I've honestly just always loved it since I was young, so that's been my favorite genre for probably as long as ever. So, of course, I started writing, like, science fiction, which just kind of just felt natural to me, if that makes sense.
Yeah, that makes sense. When you say that you always loved it, is it because you read a lot of sci-fi, you watch a lot of film, are you a big Trekkie? What brought you into that genre?
Star Wars, 100%.
Are you talking about the original Star Wars, or the other original ones, or like the new original ones?
So the first Star Wars movie I ever watched was A New Hope. So I watched in order of the original trilogy, then the prequel trilogy, and then the sequel trilogy came out. So I watched that. I got to do the release order.
Is that kind of like what you have to do to show that you're a real Star Wars fan, is that you must watch them in release order?
I don't know. I get a lot of fanboys mad at me, but I liked the sequel trilogy, so...
That's blasphemous. Someone somewhere is gasping right now.
I know.
Okay, but now going back for a second. When you decided you're going to write it, you told to your sister. She was like, oh, that's so cool. And then you told it to your parents or something? What was the reaction all around of like, hey, go for it? Or, okay, cool.
I don't think I really necessarily told my parents I was writing a novel until a few weeks later. So before then, I'd started this writing project, which was this Star Wars screenplay that I was really happy about, and I just kind of stopped, if that made sense. So they knew that I was writing some things. However, I don't really think I told them about Bioblock or anything like that until maybe a month after I'd started writing it, when I was actually starting to get a little serious about it. Mm-hmm. And I was like, goodness, this is actually going to happen. I've never been this committed to writing a book before. So that's kind of how it went.
And what was their reaction to that? They just thought it was going to be like a project thing, or did you say, no, I want to go all the way through with this and get this out there?
They were 100% supportive about that, and they were like, yeah, go for it. I think they really thought like I could. Mm-hmm. Honestly, I didn't really think I could. I was like, maybe if this is good enough, I'll publish it. But I couldn't tell anyone that.
So then when you did decide, okay, wait, I actually have a novel here, you decided, someone else suggested that it should get published. What was that moment of, not only did I write it, but I actually want to put it out?
That moment was probably during summer, I believe. And I don't quite remember what the actual moment really entailed, other than I was taking a class or something online, because I feel like it was related to movies somehow, or it was related to Star Wars, I don't know. But then I just realized, like, oh my gosh, what if my book gets, like, a film adaptation? Like, that would be so cool. But in order to get to that point someday, I actually have to write the book. So then I just kind of started writing a lot more.
And then for editing, did you go to just someone that you already knew, or did you go to hire out an editor, or you did the editing? How did that all work out?
So I have a writing coach who helps me proofread my books after I do all the kind of plot editing and stuff.
So the writing coach is the one who went through everything with you after it was done to make sure this makes sense, this is right grammar stuff, you missed something here, etc.
Yeah.
And then when you did decide to publish, what decision did you make there? Were you like, oh, I'm going to try to see how big this could go, or I'm just going to take care of it all myself, and that way I have all the control of it, etc.?
So in the beginning of the process, I wanted to traditionally publish. I was like, oh my gosh, I want to be a famous author. Be cool. But then I realized that, one, that could take years. I might be stuck on this same book. I didn't really want to be stuck on that same book. And I just decided, kind of in the end, I want kind of the freedom of it all. So I decided, like, I was going to self-publish, but then maybe in the future, like, I'll traditionally publish. That's kind of the route I'm going right now, where I'm building out my platform. So then maybe when I'm, like, 16, it'll be a lot easier to get traditionally published.
Hey, great. And then, so did you do this through Amazon Publishing, or where did you go for that?
I use both KDP and Ingram Spark to publish my paperback and ebook, and then Ingram Spark for my hardcovers.
And then what do you do for cover design? You just put it out, hey, where can I get a cover from? Or did you design it, or what do you do for that stuff?
I hire cover designers to do them. I have absolutely no artistic talent when it comes to wrong things. The majority of my covers are all designed by someone else.
Where'd you find them? You went to some sites or something that they're out there at, or you just kind of put out a call, or how'd you find someone to design the covers?
Originally, I used Reedsy to get cover designers because that's what I was using to write my books. Honestly, now I just have a lot of contacts. I just return to designers, like, depending on which book it is. So now it's a lot easier than it was a year ago.
Yeah. All of your books, you've worked on all of them with your writing coach for the editing part of all of them, or have you also made different decisions there?
I've worked on them all with my writing coach. I had like a list of like Fiverr editors at one point really early on, but I haven't kind of researched that too much yet.
It's a good relationship with a writing coach. And then, okay, so also going back, when you split up the book and you decided you're going to do a trilogy, was there something that you realized, oh wait, if it's going to be a series now and one part of the story is actually going to end with the book, there's certain changes that I've got to make? Or was it just, I was just able to kind of split up the book and just, like, I didn't have to make story changes, I just had to round off the ending or the beginning kind of thing. Like, it wasn't such a big deal to start changing stuff up.
Unlocked, because it was kind of written, it's so long, there aren't like very much ending points in each book. I have to admit, some of them are very rough. What I ended up doing was I just added a more climactic end to the first book. The second book already has a very climactic ending. So actually, it was originally, I had split the first and second book, and I split it. So the first and second book would have been one book, and then there would have been the third book. And then I actually had to split it again. So that's kind of how that went down.
Do you have other series since you wrote the trilogy, or most of your others are standalones?
I have Chronicles of Side of the Lane, which is 3 books. It's my series of novellas. There's Never Dying, which I'm writing the second book of what I think is going to be a series for that.
Do you see that there's a difference in the experience from the first time you wrote way too many words and split it up versus now when you're going into it, knowing it's going to be a series? Is your thought process a little bit different about how you're setting up the story?
A little. Generally, when I write books, I don't know if they're going to be a series until after I finish them. Because a lot of the time, I'll write a book, and I'll be like, this could be a perfectly fine standalone, but it could have a sequel. So then that sequel goes on my backlog for books to write if I have, like, no more ideas. Could have been a standalone, honestly, but I'm currently writing the sequel because I love the characters so much that I just couldn't resist.
Yeah. You make sure that the book kind of, the ending rounds itself out. It stands by itself, but you know where there's potential to carry on the story forward if you want to.
Yeah.
Do you remember some of the biggest things, like after your first book, that your writing coach went through with you that were like really big things that you had to either pay attention to that you hadn't thought of? Even if it's like minor details as far as the story goes, but for you, it was something like, hey, you gotta be more careful with X, or you gotta make sure you forgot to do X, Y, and Z, or something like that. Do you remember any big things like that where it's like, I'm totally on that now?
Oh, there were so many. There were a lot of inconsistencies in Unlocked. I would bring up something, never bring it up again. You have to kind of remember consistency with your writing. For example, you can't just make up a character. Actually, the really big one was that in one of the biomes they had a cat, and there was a cat that was the pet that lived in that. It was like a laboratory. It's really weird. And they had a cat, right? But then they leave because they have to travel, and there's no mention of the cat ever again.
Oh.
So
The cat's just gone.
Yep.
So it was more about just remembering that if you put something in the story, it doesn't just mist off. You have to remember to keep it in the story or figure out a way for it to exit the story naturally, sort of thing.
Yeah.
As soon as you heard that, you're like, oh, I totally get it. You're like, what do you mean? I didn't do that. And then you go back again. And you're like, wait, actually, that's there a lot of times.
That one I noticed myself really quickly. You know, I was just kind of thinking about the book, and I was writing down all the characters, and I was like, wait, she has a cat. What happened to the cat? And I had to go back and figure it out.
Right. Since then, do you do anything different to keep track of everything? As in, are you writing more stuff down, taking notes for yourself on your own novels, or you just, now that you know to be aware of it, you keep track of it kind of mentally?
Usually while I'm writing a book, I take a lot of notes. Usually it's on actually things that happen in the future. However, I don't think I will ever take as many notes as I did for Unlock. I had about 1,000 notes of what I wanted to happen in the story, which is probably how it got so out of hand in the first place. I don't think I will ever write as many notes as that one. However, I do still write notes.
You're saying mostly to keep track of what happens, because especially if there's, well, do you have time travel in any of your books?
Not yet, but I was actually planning a time travel book, so there's that. But usually my notes are just things I want to happen in the story, or some little plot stuff that I have to write down, but they're only like a few pages.
Right. Well, because especially with the time travel, your biggest thing is make sure the timeline matches. That if you're moving forward or back, and it's like, wait, this did or didn't happen yet, that's kind of like where stuff gets tricky with that.
Yeah.
Even while you're writing now, do you read a lot? Or now it's not as much time for reading anymore because you're writing more? Or were you always a big reader until you became a busy writer, or what?
I've always been a big reader, and I think I'm still a big reader. I've started reading more than I did a while ago. However, when I'm really, really just writing a ton, I don't have as much time to read. Yeah. But it's really helpful to read a chapter or two before you start writing. I don't know why, it just gets your mind in the kind of zone for writing.
Well, that's it, because you're seeing, as you can say, a finished product, and then if that's a model kind of like, these are what polished words look like. Okay, now we can start writing our own stuff, sort of thing.
Yeah.
Do you read a lot of sci-fi, or do you kind of read more widely than that?
I read pretty widely, so I read a lot of fantasy, contemporary, some sci-fi, but usually just whatever looks interesting.
Are you reading young adult, or are you reading mainly adult stuff?
Mainly YA.
Well, that's also because YA didn't always have so much sci-fi in it. They've been pushing it for the last couple of years to try to get more out there with the sci-fi. Yeah. Fantasy obviously is huge, and contemporary is huge. Have you had, for yourself personally, if you've ever been tempted to put something in your book that you're like, if my parents were sitting and reading this in front of me, I might squirm a little bit, either for language or for romance or anything like that, or you just keep everything, like, if we just focus on the story, we're not going to add any of that kind of stuff in?
Usually what I do is I try not to write anything that I don't think my parents would allow me to read. Yeah. I wrote in a couple kind of romance scenes that aren't really bad. I can't write anything past Fate of Laugh without laughing.
That's one gauge. No, wait, I can't be serious about this anymore. Never mind, let's cut out the scene.
Yeah, but it's gotten funny because my parents will be sometimes reading the books next to me, and I'll be looking over to see what parts they're reading, and I'll just start laughing.
You don't feel a little bit weird when they're sitting reading in front of you, and you're like, what are they thinking? What are they thinking? Not really.
Oh, yeah, all the time.
So once you got your first book out there, and all your books so far have been published in the same kind of, the KDP Ingram Spark kind of model, correct?
Yeah.
So once you got the book out there, what did you do after that? As far as, you just tell everybody you know about it, or what did you do to tell someone that you have a book?
A lot of marketing. So a lot of my marketing is actually my pre-marketing campaign to build sort of anticipation for the release, but then after, of course, I have to keep up a good, strong marketing campaign. Mainly what I use to market my books is TikTok. I have more followers on TikTok than I do on any other platform, and I have a pretty good reach on there, so I can TikTok ads, or I can just make posts telling people to buy my books or promoting it, and I can get some sales from that. Otherwise, I use a variety of online marketing tools, so Free Booksy, Bargain Booksy, I'm going to try Book Club at some point, and things like that.
So for TikTok, for example, do you read any part of the book? Do you just show them what it is and tell them about it? What do you do there?
I post a variety of writing and book-related content. Some of it is just writing tips, because a lot of people really want tips and they want to know how to do it. Otherwise, I'll post stuff about my characters, my plot, sometimes excerpts of the books, sometimes very random posts. Honestly, just whatever I think will get people to either follow me or book.
And is this stuff that you kind of came up with on your own, or did you speak with someone, or was there some sort of forum or something that you're part of to find out about marketing?
I come up with most of my videos on my own.
Do you see that most of however much of the readers that you know of, are they mainly just your age group that's responding to this, or are you kind of getting a larger variety than you thought, like a wider range?
I have I don't know if it's abnormal or not, but I have a pretty big range of readers. So some of my readers will be kind of middle-aged men, others will be teenage girls. It's honestly, I think my books are pretty appropriate for anyone. However, I have some books I think are more specific to certain kind of age groups and target audiences because of the sort of experiences the characters have in the books. Honestly, I've never been able to pinpoint a target audience because it's all just really varies on the book, and then it's still very sort of wide regardless.
Well, I guess sometimes genre kind of trumps the other factor. So anybody who's interested in sci-fi might be willing to give it a look, no matter how old they are, if it just seems interesting to them.
Yeah.
Yeah. And then looking back, so let's see, we're about 2 years since you first decided you're going to write a novel. Do you feel different as a writer, as in, besides for the word count, do you think that there's certain things you've gotten better at, or you're more under control at, or you've discovered kind of different things, just from the experience of writing and publishing and things like that?
I'm not quite sure. There have been several things I've gotten better at. For example, I've gotten a lot better at checking my books before I publish them to make sure there's no missing copyright pages. That happens quite a bit. Otherwise, I've gotten a lot better at managing my time and figuring out how much I'm going to do per day. Originally, I was only doing a sentence per day or a chapter a day. I wasn't really writing consistently. However, once I kind of got into the groove of it, I was doing 1,000 words a day every single day on school days. And now, honestly, I've really kind of changed a little. So I still do 1,000 words a day on school days, but since the summer, I've been doing about 3,000 words a day, and then sometimes 1,000 words when it's really busy. But I always have to write over 1,000 words every day.
So you feel like you've got the technical part of it down, kind of more. From where you are now, you're just I'm just going to keep writing forever and ever? Or are you thinking I'll just keep writing till a certain point, and then maybe I'll branch out and try other things from there?
Well, I really want to turn this into a full-time career. So Definitely, it's I want to write for a living.
Specifically novels, or do you think you want to try out some other stuff?
Maybe novels, screenplays. I want to try out a lot of different writing-related things.
Since that first walk on the beach, are you getting ideas from everywhere and then you just kind of jot them down and like, oh, I'll look at you when it's time to have another book? Or how does that kind of go?
Yeah, definitely. I get so many new ideas that it's so hard to keep track of them. I manage to keep track of them, but it's definitely a bit of a challenge. So just any time I have an idea,
Do you write down all your ideas, or only if you think about it a little bit and you're like, no, I think I could get a book out of this? Or it's like, I'll decide later if I could get a book out of it?
Usually it's like, maybe this could be a good idea, so I have to decide whether or not it'll actually work. But usually they do.
Have you come across, like, you have an idea that you thought was such a good idea, and then randomly you're reading this book and you're like, wait a second. Oh, it's already been done. Oh, no.
Once I had an idea that at first I was really excited about, and I thought, oh my goodness, this is going to be so cool. I love this idea. And what I realized only about 2,000 words in is the character's voice I didn't really like, and the writing felt super cartoonish. So what I ended up doing was I just scrapped it and started writing a new book.
Well, that's not too bad. That's just your idea not necessarily panning out, not that someone else had already done it.
Yeah.
Yeah, that happens. I once spoke to a director, I think it was a director-writer, and he said, we all have some bad ideas in us, so just get them all out, and then you'll be able to focus only on your good ideas. Or something like that. Wow, very good. So we always wrap up with a fill in the blank of, I really like it when choosing one, writers, editors, publishers, covers, whatever, anything story-related, story, series. I really like it when, fill in the blank, and I really don't like, fill in the blank. So it could be, kind of your soapbox answer, or your off-the-cuff answer. So how would you fill in the blank for that?
I really like it when books have a super strong plot mixed with characters. I really don't like it when books have... I do occasionally like books that have absolutely no plot, but I usually don't like it when I feel like they're not going anywhere. There's no sort of end goal. It's just writing until something happens that ends the book.
So the first part, character and plot, you're saying that you really like the mix of the character-driven and the plot-driven kind of books?
Yeah.
Versus some that are just like literary pieces or like stream of consciousness sort of things?
Yeah.
Ah, okay. It sounds like you like things that are specifically fast-paced, or just it has to have a pace of going somewhere?
I love fast-paced books. Oh yeah, another one. I also really like it when books have short chapters, because I cannot stand like really long chapters.
Do you write very short chapters, now that you've said that?
Usually, yeah.
Yeah, that's like the James Patterson kind of style. Because you feel like you're always turning pages.
Yeah.
Oh, well, so that sort of answered what I was going to ask about. But one more question in there. You say you've got a bunch of ideas. Do you start a book as soon as you think that you've got a solid idea? Do you need to know the beginning, the middle, the end? At what point are you like, okay, now it's ready for me to start writing it?
Once I have like no other book to write and I've just finished a book, usually it's that I need to have the characters in mind and just some overall goal for the story. Like, what's the problem necessarily that's going on? What needs to be fixed?
So you don't even know necessarily how it's going to be fixed or who's going to fix it. You just know there's a problem and somehow it's going to get fixed.
Yeah.
And then you just go. No outlining, whatever. You just pants it out.
Yeah. And then in the second half, to make it look like I knew it was going to happen all along.
As you do that, do you kind of get surprised sometimes of like, oh, I wouldn't have thought of this one. This is a cool idea. Okay, here we go. As far as when you're solving it.
The one book I just finished, I have to admit, I had no idea of how the problem was going to be solved. I had to wing it, and I'm still a little scared to go back and edit that one.
To be like, wait a second, whose idea was this? Or you'll be very, pleasantly surprised. Who knows? Who knows what it'll be? We hope it's that option, right? Instead of like, wait a second, take this all apart. Oh, yeah. Okay. I'll tell you what, we're going. Do you have any beta readers for your book, or is it just you and your writing coach, and then no one else gets to see it till it comes out?
I've thought about getting beta readers, but usually it's like no one gets to see it until it comes out because I don't know why. I have art readers.
Yeah, well, so at that point it's kind of coming out already. Or have you had someone say something to you and then you went back to change because of that?
Usually nothing yard readers say will get me to change the book.
Right. I mean, it'd really be, I guess, if there was like a major plot hole or something, which assuming you've caught already.
Or if there's some grammatical errors, like I'll go back and fix them. But other than that, I haven't really had anything that's like big enough to change.
Right. Well, yeah, grammatical errors, it's almost like a polish. It's not even like a fix. Aside from the TikTok, when you're out and about or if you meet other people, do you talk about being an author, or you just kind of, no, we only talk about it on TikTok and social media sort of thing?
I do. I tell people about it quite a bit. It's interesting and it's kind of a conversation starter.
Right.
How I really walk around and say, oh, I'm an author.
Yeah, because some of the biggest things for a lot of writers that, they love writing, they love books, they love all this stuff, but then when it actually comes time to their own book, they kind of feel embarrassed to talk about it or to mention it, not because they're embarrassed of the book, but if all of a sudden they don't know how to put it into a conversation anymore. Was that something you kind of I figured it out, or like, no, I had to train myself to bring it up and be like, oh yeah, by the way, I write books.
I definitely get that. It's a little hard, and I get like asked questions about, oh, you write books, especially from like friends' parents. Oh, I get a lot of it.
Is your answer just like, yeah, whatever, or you're like, yeah, of course I can write a book?
Yeah, definitely like the mix between kind of the two of those.
There's no rules. The rule is to have a good story. So if you could have a good story, then it doesn't matter who or what or where or whatever. Shanti, very good. Thank you so much for joining us today on the podcast.
Oh, thank you for having me.
This was a bonus episode of Oh My Word podcast featuring author Shanti Hershenson. To find out more about Shanti and her work, please visit the link in the episode notes. To find out more about Oh My Word podcast and to keep track of all the great stuff we're up to, follow us on Instagram at Oh My Word podcast, or please check us out at el10about.com. Music is by Tim Burke. Thank you so much for joining us. Catch you next time.